Okay, from that T intersection, can you tell me which way the bottom of the T pushes towards and which way that supply truck is facing?
The supply truck is in line with the bottom of the T facing the downward section.
So the truck is facing east?
Affirm, it's facing mostly east, yes.
Okay, so that is the target.
I wanted to look up correlation because I think sometimes it's good to get to the root of a word and understand it. And it's really just a mutual relationship or connection between two or more things, which is what we've been talking about. Speaking of definitions, contact acknowledges sighting of a specific reference point, either visual or sensor. So again, contact can be with your eyes or with your targeting pod. You're just acknowledging, yep, I got contact on that grid or whatever. So it's a reference point. Tally is visual sighting of a target, non-friendly aircraft or enemy position, opposite of no joy. We are sighting with our eyes a target. Capture is a specified surface target or object has been acquired and is being tracked by an onboard sensor. Again, we have a target and we're seeing it with our sensor. We don't use tally or capture when we're looking at friendlies. You could say visual, but tally and capture is, remember, they're both in relation to targets. And then looking is the opposite of contact. And as opposed to saying something like, oh, I don't know, I was looking over here, and just say looking, keep the comms clear. We have to understand where our starting point is and where we're trying to get to. So target correlation, talk on descriptions, and direction should be simple and short. I want to repeat that. Simple and short. Driving the aircrew's eyes and or sensors from one point to another. A technique for doing this is giving directions in the format known by the mnemonic FIDO. So FIDO is from a point, in a direction, distance to travel, object seen. So this is just a simple format. Again, we want these to be concise, simple instructions. Confirmers. So use confirmers around targets and or objects to ensure the aircraft is in the correct area. So if you try to confirm, hey, you're talking about the two dudes on the roof and they're farther out, you can't use that as a confirmation. That's going to tell you need more communication. Can you use plain language? And I'll ask this to the Hornet School folks first. What do you guys think? Can we use plain language when we're doing this?
Absolutely. Everybody understands it.
So the answer is yes. If you don't know some specialized word, it's better that you say the thing than you say nothing. Brevity does make it faster, but definitely use your words. In any case, we want to be slow because slow is smooth and smooth is fast. You want to be deliberate and you want to make sure that you're not talking too fast. If the situation is to the point where you're feeling hyped up, you got to make yourself slow down because all you're going to do is hype up other people and you'll likely make a mistake. And one of the ways we do this is we don't do push to think. Any of the Hornet School guys, I'm going to pick on you guys, sorry, want to guess at what push to think means?
It means when you click the mic and then you just sit there and don't say anything.
Yeah. Or what you say is garbage. Right? So try to, in all of the chaos, slow is smooth. Take a second. Which way is that intersection going? What am I trying to get him to? How can I say this? And if you just take 5 or 10 seconds, even if it's chaos, but you get out a good message versus trying to redo your message, you're going to save time. So really the push to talk is to talk because you've already thought. So it's not to push to think. And if somebody's fast or they're scrambled or something is confusing, ask them to slow down or say again or start to have a conversation. We're going to talk about features and we're really going to get into roads, buildings, and terrain, but let's focus on roads. Hardball road is just brevity for saying it's paved. Softball is for dirt. Again, if you don't know, just say, hey, it looks like a dirt road. you may not be able to tell from your position. Name roads, we'll get into that, where you can actually name that road. Intersections, T-intersections, 4 intersections, all great things to reference. Distinguishing features, vegetation, power lines, bridges, tunnels, anything that you can use to help you understand what you're looking at is key. And there's a never-ending list of possibilities. Going back to our intersection, typically you're going to get past a grid. So military grid reference system. We're not going to go into that here, but it's just like a lat long, but it's just a system for the military. And if they gave you this grid, then you would be pointed within 100 meters of this intersection with a 6-digit grid. So now that we have our common T intersection, we're going to start using some terminology here. So we could call that the top of the T. And that now gives us a reference point for what we're looking at to distinguish against another part. And the way we could correlate the top of the T is we could ask, what direction is the top of the T oriented? And anyone want to guess which way that's oriented?
North.
So when we say the top of the T, to be clear, we're talking about left to right here.
East-west.
East to west.
Okay, yeah.
So you could say, I have contact on the T, the top of the T, or the T intersection, the top of the T is oriented east to west. So the long stem of the T or the bottom of the T, and which way does the long stem head out?
South.
South.
Right. It's going south. So now we have distinguished the intersection with a bit of language so that we have it oriented. Now, what would happen if this T was kind of facing a little bit southeast and it wasn't perfectly south? You could call it southeast, but if it's just slightly southeast, you may just want to establish that as south. Doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but within reason. Now we have a hard ball road. We can see here pretty well that this is a paved road. At least it looks like that to me. If you're not sure, say you're not sure. One thing we can do is we can name that road. So now we have a hard ball road and we're going to name this Route Green. And so we have another reference point for the bottom of the T, the long stem of the T. We could say on Route Green. Same thing for the top of the T. If you wanted to name that hardball road, you could name it Route Red. Sometimes this is established in a briefing before the mission, and you would have a map with a reference point, and they might say, hey, I need you to reference the intersection between Route Red and Route Green, which would be where this T intersection is. When you're out here, this could have a purpose. It could be a little bit extraneous to the moment. It kind of depends on the context and how long you're there. Units of measure. So it talked about before having the possibility of a unit of measure. So in this case, we have a unit of measure that we're going to establish based on what I would say is pretty easy to understand. So if I said from the top of the T going south till you get to the first building on the east side, you would literally be going south from the T, and this is the east side and the first building. So we have now established a unit of measure. And that unit of measure can be used for whatever purpose. Any questions on the unit of measure?
I'm gonna play a little bit of devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
What was the original reference to establish the top of the T? I may have missed it.
It was a grid, 6-digit grid.
Okay, that gets the sensor in there. Okay.
Within 100 meters.
Within 100 meters. Because from 15, 20,000 feet, what I'm seeing is 3 top of the T's, which is the pilot's perspective right now, right?
All right.
We're in the overhead.
You're talking about this top of this T and this top of this T?
The two with the 2 south running roads that terminate in T's on the east-west running MSR.
You're right. I wasn't thinking about those when we did. You're correct.
Yeah. So
they're probably more than 100 meters, but yes.
Yeah. Just again doing this terrain association and the correlation of what you grew up learning, like how big are those buildings? Those are probably 50-meter compounds. I don't know. It's very difficult to say. If you've been flying in the area, you kind of know about how big each one of those compounds are. So let's call it 50 meters, 150 feet.
So you
So now
mean
you
from
can
like
come in.
here to here or like here to here?
Just the buildings themselves, like those
Okay.
are maybe those are buildings. I don't see a lot of walled compounds around these, but typically,
There's a
you know,
walled compound here, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
But let's just pick a number. Let's say it's 100 meters, 300 feet. So now you can start to build a reference, right? So if and then the second point is, where are we doing this guidance from? Like, who is calling? So you're building a, or the way this picture is being described is from the same viewpoint as who you're describing it to. So your unit of measure that you're calling out from the top of the T to the first building that you see is from your 20,000 foot perspective. It's from this map.
Yes.
But imagine yourself on the ground down that road another 50 meters, and you are the infantry platoon that's holed up behind a wall taking fire from the top of the T, and you're the JTAC embedded with them. What does he see? He sees nothing but up and down that lane, and he sees a couple of buildings maybe 25 meters on either side. He doesn't know, again, perspective. There's no unit of measure from his perspective, unless he has a map.
The unit of measure, this is a method that air-to-air use. It's not usually associated with the ground because the ground doesn't have the same perspective as this, unless they're using range finding. So this using the measure to move your sensor across the ground from this perspective is done for air players.
Okay, so we're building a word picture to pass targets between two aircraft.
Yes.
In this case, I'm just trying to establish some common language about the top of the T, naming routes, whatever, and I'm throwing this in as an additional thing. But yes, I don't see how a JTAC would use that very easily unless they had some top-down view or enough elevation to see that.
Yep.
So I'll talk about that in my experience. Using units of measure when you're a JTAC is a lot of the times, for example, you might receive a target that an aircraft spotted and you might plot that, and then you might pass it to another aircraft, or XYZ scenario. But nonetheless, you have a map that you plotted this target on that you got from somewhere, and it's maybe you see an airport nearby and you want to use maybe establish the runway as a unit of measure, and then from the runway go 3 units of measure west, and then you'll see a tank there. So in that case, if we're looking, like Brenda said, top down 30,000 foot view, or in the JTAC's case, using a 1 to 50,000 scale map, that might be an example of when we would use it.
Perfect.
In some cases today too, whatever you're seeing can be sent down to the ground to a handheld device, right? They get the full picture.
Yep. And
without getting into specifics.
Yeah, no. So we use a video downlink simulation in DCS. I stream one of my targeting pods in Discord, and that can be used for that purpose. Anything else on this before we move on? Okay, good stuff. Okay, so this comes straight out of the JPub that we mentioned before. A 2-to-1 ratio should be used when conducting talk-ons. Give 2 directive statements, then ask a confirming question of the aircrew, or vice versa. So again, 2 directive statements and a confirming question. So concise, comms, and make sure we're looking at the same thing. We're going to do a comms example. We're going to just look at the comms, and then we're going to overlay it on the map and look at how this becomes a talk-on. Dragon 2-1 from Junkie 1-3, from the T intersection, look south to the first building on the east side of the road, which we saw. So this is 2 directive statements. Look south until you see the building on the east. And then the aircrew acknowledges contact. Then the JTAC says, Dragon 2-1, what side of the building has a walled-in courtyard? A confirming question. Then the aircrew, or the TAC aircraft, says there is a large walled courtyard on the south side and 2 smaller ones on the west side. So he's taking that correlation and adding a little bit more information. Dragon 2-1 from that building, look east across the open area for the first north-south compound wall or fence. Attack aircraft, Dragon 2-1 has contact with the south end of the wall that splits between two buildings. So now what we have here is the aircrew is now adding a confirming question or a confirming statement back to the JTAC. So this can work either way. So this is a confirmatory comm provided by the pilot. In absence, the JTAC or FAC-A could ask, what do you see south end of the wall in this scenario? So let's put this into the actual map we've been looking at. So again, we got our 6-digit grid with a 100-meter accuracy. We start from here, and Dragon 2-1 asks him to look down south to the building, right? So two directive statements. Then Dragon 2-1 has contact on that building. Dragon 2-1, what side of the building has a walled-in courtyard? So as you can see here, he's taking a look, and he can see on the south side there is a large one. And then on the east side, there are on the west side, there are two smaller ones, at least from what it appears to be to him. So does anybody see how this can help correlate between some of the other buildings and how this is related to the position of the courtyard and the building itself? From here, now the JTAC wants us to go somewhere else. So Dragon 2-1 from that building, look east across the open area to the first north-south compound wall. So he calls contact and furthers it and says, look, I see that this wall runs south and splits between two buildings. So this is him adding a confirmatory question to the statement saying, yeah, I got your wall, confirming that, when it runs south, there's two buildings that splits. And he's like, yep. So now you're talked on to this set of buildings. And that's where I say work the problem together. It's not one-sided. Whether you're talking about people who look like they're on a roof or where the fence line runs or what building it is, either way can start working the problem. And as you get more comfortable, you could see where you could start adding into this. Dragon 2-1, the building on the east side of the fence is your target. So if we're looking down here and we look for the east side, that's this here. Dragon 2-1 capture. So he's got in his sensor confirming it is the square one. So of these two buildings, there's only one that's square, I guess, completely. And just adding one more confirming thing because he wants to be extra sure he blows up the right building.